So just as a reminder to everybody, it is recording. Okay, your faces are not being recorded, but your voices will be if you have a question. But I do encourage you to ask questions because lots of other people probably have the same question. Okay, and as always, it's hard for me to see the chat. So if you have an immediate question and one of your peers can't answer it, then make sure you vocalize that question so I can help. So what we're going to do is I just have to do this for the camera. You don't need to do this. But I'm just going to create my frame of reference that I can work within, and it's still going to appear on the camera. Okay, now we haven't really talked much about the head, correct? Like we've done like a small lecture on the skull, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so like let's just start off with kind of rehashing some of that. Okay, so I'm going to actually right now draw with contour, but like our gestural approach. So remember that gesture is a fast, all over moving linear drawing method, opposed to contour, which is slow and sort of methodical. Gesture is about everything, contour is about details. So I'm just going to sketch in like a little bit of a gestural head here.
Do you want us to do that?
No, I'm just going to talk for a few minutes. Okay. So a gestural head, y'all, is, when we talk about creating a gestural head, what we're talking about is giving someone the idea that there's a head there. Okay. So this is kind of like, if you can kind of think about cartoons, this is kind of like how cartoons sort of like we think about cartoons as being made from simplified gestural elements. Now, the idea behind like a gestural head, basically, right, is to show as much of the foundational information of a head as possible, but also to establish that head within some type of body. And so you'll notice that when I do gestural heads like this, that I always am going to try to include the neck because that's going to center my head and stop it from floating off the page. So when I do a gestural head, if we just return to like the first stage there, you notice that I start with kind of two eggs. Now there are so many different sort of approaches to doing the head. This is the one that I find works well for me, and so this is the one I teach, but y'all might know one differently already, and so that's cool. Just use that, okay? But don't use something which doesn't make you think about the relationship between the frontal elements of the skull and the cranium, okay? Otherwise, what often happens is we often end up with heads without brains because we're focused solely on the front and we forget about the back, and that's just not going to work. Okay, it's like hairdressers will tell you that one of the most important parts of your haircut is the back. Even though you never see it, it's the thing that most people see, right? Like, unless there's somebody that you're working with or something like that. But like on the street, on the escalator, like people are always looking at the back of your head, right? And so don't, this is where our brain is. This is where the important stuff happens, is inside the cranium. So don't forget about it. Now, if we start off with those the two eggs, the first line to establish is that median line that's going to go through the center of the head. The median line is an anatomical line that dictates the difference between the left and the right side of the body. So my head is slightly turning towards the left. That means that because of the perspective and the way that the head sits in space, that from the left side to the median line will be decreased, and from the median line to the right side will be increased. Okay, so one of the ways you can practice this is literally get an egg, draw a median line on the egg, and a transverse line through the center for the eyes, and then roll it around in your hand and draw it from different points of view. And as the egg rolls in your hand, then different amounts of that space will be made visible or decrease in visibility. So if the egg rolls back and the eyes are back here, then the top quarters are reduced, the bottom quarters are elongated, the left side is reduced, the right side is elongated. So it's a great little trick to have, sort of at your disposal, which is just drawing the median and the transverse line on the egg. So on the egg, right, this is our egg, we have the median line that runs down the middle. And then we have the first transverse line, which is for the eyes, it's halfway up the egg. So when the head or the egg starts to move and rotate, the placement of that transverse line to the median line is going to decrease and increase quantities of information. And that's how you're able to dictate to the viewer which way the head is turned. So when I draw the gestural head, I begin with my two eggs, I find the median line, I find the first transverse line, which is going to be the eyes. Now the eyes, if the head is looking straight up, the eyes are located halfway through the head, but my head is slightly turned down, so there's going to be an increase here and a decrease there. And so that's going to tell the viewer that the head is pushed downwards. I divide this space in half here, and that kind of tells me where my pupils are going to go if my head is looking forward. It also just dictates where the eye socket is. Now, typically, you can divide this space into thirds like this, and that's going to give you a pretty good general form for the head distribution of features. However, again, my head is slightly looking down, so I'm going to actually like elongate my nose a little bit, decrease the space between my nose and my mouth, and decrease the space for my chin because the head is pushed downwards. So what I'm trying to show you is that depending on the way that the head is existing in space, the location of features can decrease or increase based on how much of a plane is visible. So like here, if we go through here and we pull down into the neck, we pull down that median line through the neck, through the sternum. So it's outie, innie, outie. Then we have here the same thing, decrease, increase. Okay, and so like with that sort of movement through the median line, that's also going to help the viewer to understand that the head is turned downwards. So the median line runs through the center of the skull, through the neck, and into the sternum, which is your breast plate, right? Our ears, we always want to remember our ears. You can just put them in right now, kind of like as little rectangles, you see? And again, depending on how much of the head is turned or exposed, that's going to dictate how much of the ear is visible. Our ears are basically the top of our ears basically line up with our eyebrows. The bottom of our ears basically line up with our nose. General rules, these are not absolutes. These are just general ideas. Okay, so we're going to go through this in a sec, and we're sort of pick apart all these proportions for you. So what I would do now at this point is I would actually shade in this. Usually we can imagine the light is going to come from above. That means the eye sockets will be in value. Underneath the nose will be in value. Underneath the mouth will be in value, and underneath the chin will be in value. That is the light logic that we've been studying since we started to talk about light logic. That means that we will have our hair will be the brightest thing in this situation and come through here or whatever, depending on the haircut. That means that there will be a shadow projected onto the neck from the head, right? And that then any type of bone here, like the clavicle, would be projecting a shadow underneath. The shadows are the way that you're going to make the bone step forward or the form step forward, rather than thinking about just edge and line. So, when we start to look at the relationship of light on the forms and how they create planes and are affected by planes, we can start to create like dimensionality in our gestural head as like a next step. very loosely thinking about value. And then that can help us to basically start to have a dimensional and believable form. So, if the light is hitting the top of the bridge of the nose and the top of the cheeks, the zygomatic, then we know that if the top of the cheek has light, then underneath will be dark, right? And that then there might be some light here around the mouth. And so there's a rhythm here. Light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. So when you're looking for the way to show form in a figure, you're looking for that light logic, look for the rhythm. There's also this rhythm, outie, innie, outie, okay? And so that rhythm is echoed, for instance, in many places in the figure, on the spine, right? We have clavicle, thoracic, lumbar, sternum, coccyx, or sorry, pelvis, coccyx, not sternum. And so we can see that there's like a balance that is achieved through the body. And we also see that, for instance, on the arms, where we have like a big egg for the top of the arm, a smaller egg, and then an egg for the hand. We often will see like an emphasis like here, 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 here. And so that becomes the fingers here, right? And then this becomes the top of the forearm, and then this becomes the back of the arm. And so rhythm is a big part to sort of seeing the way that the figure is put together. So that was my little warm up, y'all. So here we go. I need a warm up, just like, we all need a warm up before we start doing something. Let's go ahead and start off. We're going to talk about the head from the front. So let's go ahead and start off with an egg.
Professor Vaughn, which charcoal do you want us to be using?
I would start with your vine.
Thank you.
Sorry, the medium vine. Okay, immediately after drawing your egg, okay, draw your median line down the center. Don't make this contour, y'all. Don't make this as dark as it possibly can go. We don't want that. We want a malleable, adjustable line. Median line. Halfway up the head, transverse line. Think about your egg. It has a curve to it. And then here and about here, so here's this rounded part, here's this rounded part. Just draw straight down for the neck. Now the neck actually connects behind the ear, okay? So the neck is created from two different muscles on each side, basically, right? So here's my head. And back here, we have the occipital bone, right? We have styloid process, mastoid process, mandible. Okay, I know you can't really read that, but I'm just pointing them out. Okay. And down here, in here, of course, we have cervical, okay, thoracic. Okay. So at the top of the cervical, you have your atlas and your axis that comes down, and where you have your first thoracic, that's where you have that first rib, and that's going to come over and hit the sternum. Okay, so you have a muscle that runs from the mastoid process down here to the sternum on each side of the neck. So here's the neck. There's the chin. This runs down through here. It creates a little notch there, which we all know about. So that's called the sternomastoid muscle. It's called that because it goes from the sternum to the mastoid, okay? And so that sternomastoid muscle, those are the muscles that create the outside of your neck, and they meet at that notch right at your clavicle. So it's important to place the neck in the right spot. Often when we start drawing heads, y'all, students, bless their soul, will not really quite get the location of the neck in terms of like muscle memory. So I often get necks that are out here, okay, as if someone has been taking some radioactive steroids. Or I get necks that are the opposite, and they come through here. So that in that case, everybody's head is attached like a balloon. And so what you need to do to figure out the proportion of the head is you need to look where on the curve of the jaw do you see the neck interacting, and then pull it from there. Okay, and again, it has that notch there that's created by those two muscles on each side. Okay. So it's really important, even right in the beginning, when you first start your drawing, you have your egg. You have your median line, transverse line, neck. Okay. So when you go to do your self-portraits, y'all, on the first day of critiques, because you have multiple critiques to help you do a good job, like you will see heads without necks. And that's just straight up a no-no. Okay, the other thing that we're going to start to focus on is the idea that when we draw with charcoal, we want to draw across the whole drawing space rather than just in sections. That's going to give us more unified and whole drawings. Okay. All right, take your chamois and wipe that away. Now you should start getting a tone in your drawing space. Okay, and we want that tone. We need that tone. So go ahead and wipe that away. I can see some of you did not wipe it away. So go ahead and wipe that away. The recording is back on. All right, so let's try again. Okay, nice oval. Okay, give us a good strong egg. Okay, median line, transverse line, neck. How long is the neck? You could go ahead and make it about, I mean, what is that? Like maybe a little bit more than half. I don't know. People have different necks. Do what you feel looks good. Then don't forget the shoulders coming out. They're just going to be like right now, they can just be, you make like an eye shape because, they're not really angles. They're not really round, just something that represents the idea of the rib cage, which is basically like, gosh, it's like an egg. Okay, now different generalized rules you'll see in different places. Okay, I like to go ahead and when I get my halfway mark, which is about here, is a little bit low. I like to go ahead and divide this here and here. So this line's going to go that way, that line's going to go that way, echo the shape. And that just kind of tells me where my eyes are going to go. And I come down here. It's about a third of the way down, a third of the way down, a third of the way down from the bottom of the eye. So like you can see like here, here, here. Now this line, y'all, does not represent the center of the mouth. It's the bottom of, it's the shadow underneath the bottom lip. Lots of different systems get employed here. I like this one. This works well for me. Now
Professor?
remember that the eyes, go ahead.
So you said that I just want to make sure the line that you use for the eye, is it like kind of halfway, like right in the middle, or is it a bit above?
It's halfway. My first one wasn't quite right.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yeah. So for some students, like they look at that, they go, gosh, that's just so low. Well, it's not in comparison to the actual and that's a great question. Thank you. It's not in comparison to the actual anatomy, right? Like what happens is students will often hear me say it's halfway up the head. And then what they'll do is they're like, draw the bangs. So say this person has straight bangs. You know, it's Cece from New Girl. I'm always so jealous of her bangs. Okay, and so they go, okay, well, there are the bangs, so the eyes are halfway up the head. And so the eyes end up being down there. And that's just not going to be correct. You have to remember that we're talking here about the anatomy of the cranium, you know. So you have parietal bones, you have frontal bone, you have zygomatic bone. And so halfway up the actual from the bottom of the chin, which is your medius, to the top of the parietal bones. Now, when I come through here, okay, so I've got my eyes. I put my eyes kind of like right below that halfway point. I'm just gonna put them in this like dark shapes. And then again, this is the shadow underneath the nose. This is the shadow underneath the bottom lip. So just above that, I'm going to put the line between the lips, depending on the thickness of that lip. Okay. And then I've got the bottom of the chin. So that's my basic structure for the head. Basically, if a person is looking straight forward, not always, y'all, and this is where we get into like the conversation about the decolonization of art education, okay? General rules that we teach in Western art education are generally based on European white features, all right? And so these are just generalizations. Do they work on other people of other racial backgrounds? Yes, they do, okay? But you're also gonna start to see some variations based on like the racial makeup of an individual. Okay, so whatever that person's race is, all right? Now, when we teach drawing, when we teach painting, and we're talking about the body, like, you know, there are things that we're talking about that are basically, we're talking about observation. Now, if you're with a peer and a peer is trying to draw you and they make a drawing of you and you don't look good, like that's them just trying to learn, okay? You can tell when someone's trying to learn versus when somebody is like being vindictive, right? And so that goes for anybody at any time. You always would sort of say to your peer, like, don't be afraid, like, to make mistakes when you're drawing me. I'm not gonna tell you that you made me look ugly, right? Or I'm not gonna tell you that you made me look heavier than I am or whatever. Like, we're all here to learn. And one of the things that's really interesting that I've always found fascinating from a teaching point of view is watching people draw other people, how much of their own personal issues they bring to drawing other people. It's fascinating from a teaching point of view. So by that, what I mean is like I've actually employed rather sort of what we would call like in art, like Rubenesque or curvy models who have come to the studio to pose for students. And in particular, female identifying students have thinned out the models and made them thin. And that is like a societal pressure. I've seen the same exact thing happen with male identifying students, with male identifying models, you know, who they will actually elongate the genitals because they don't want to be, first of all, you know, there's an uncomfortability about looking at genitals, but then there's also like this social construct of like what is the correct size. And so if a model deviates from that, then it becomes a hindrance. So people bring their own problems to drawing the figure. It's really interesting. And, you know, even though I study the figure, I do that too. You know what I mean? Like maybe I don't want a figure that I'm working from to look, older. So I like might reduce their wrinkles or, you know, I don't know, like there's just things that we do, right? Like that are just inherent societal pressures. So generally speaking, what we can say is this, okay, that if you draw a line straight, like, so here is our transverse line, there should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal sections across the head for the eyes. Okay, my middle section here is just a bit too wide. It needs to be a bit smaller. That includes on each side half a section for the temple and half a section from the ear if you're looking straight forward. Okay, so go ahead. Here's our egg. Here's our median line. Halfway up the head is the eyes. A third to the bottom of the mouth is a third. To the chin is a third. Halfway through the space is the eyes. Okay? Then we're going to divide the space into 5 equal sections. Okay? And that's going to be how many eye widths there are across the head. Now try to be loosey-goosey with this, okay? Don't be contoury. If you contour, you're going to end up with a robot face. Think about darkness, okay? We're thinking like Sith lords here and lordesses, you know, ladies. I guess they'd be. I guess that's what the female connotation of lord is, lady, not lordesses. I don't think that's a real word. So we have 5 across, right? And then the last section on each side, half of that is for the temple and half is for the ear. It's not 5 across plus ears. Okay. It's basically 4.5 of head, half and half of ear. Okay. And I'm just going to put them in like darkness. Okay. Again, I got the darkness under the nose, the darkness under the bottom lip. I can just a little bit above that, I can put the darkness between the lips and the darkness under the chin. This is light logic where the light is coming from above, which is where it usually is in the studio setting. So when we come to, you know, everyone has a very distinguished jawline. You know, I spend a lot of time as an instructor like talking about diversity. And I always like to make sure that I'm also including myself in that. Like as a trans woman, how does my jawline, like how do I, you know, what does my jawline culturally signify? Like things that, you know, people ask me like, do you ever stop thinking about gender? And I'm like, no, because every day I'm thinking about gender because it's how I'm basically trying to survive in the world. So like I have friends who get what we call FFS, which is facial feminization surgery, where their jawline is changed, their hairline is changed, and often they have like rhinoplasty. And that's because there are like, you know, the way that we see things like jawlines have cultural connotations as to what is male, what is female. So it's a very interesting sort of like my friend right now, who I think is has very feminine features. She's going to be getting FFS. And I don't really see why she's going to be doing that because her features are so feminine, but she feels that culturally that she's not signifying, you know, like for culture, but also to herself, you know, what she thinks an attractive female is. And I think that's a really interesting place to examine identity as a trans person. Okay, so when you look at someone's jaw, you want to see like, do they have angles or do they have a rounder jaw? It just depends on the person. As you've heard me say, I have multiple jaws to pick from when I draw. I didn't used to, but that's just the way it goes. Gravity does its work. And I make fun of myself. I'm sorry. I just find my body to be interesting as it ages. All right, so when we come through here, right now we have an eye width between the eyes, and that's going to be the width of the nostrils. Not always, not always, but generally we can say it is. We might see, for instance, on somebody who has, perhaps an African American, that maybe they actually their nostrils are a little bit wider than their tear ducts. We might see on someone who is entirely has the majority of their DNA is French. You might see a much rounder shape of an eye, which also affects the width of the nostril. So depending on a person's makeup, you might see a little bit of variation in the width of the nostrils versus the location of their tear ducts. So again, y'all, these are just generalizations. So the nostrils are about one eye width wide. And then if you take your eye width and you physically measure down your face, this should be about 1.5 eye lengths long from kind of the top of the bridge of the nose. So this space in here, one eye width should go into that space about 1.5 times to establish that length. Now, if you take your eye width, there's usually an eye width from the bottom of your nostril to underneath the bottom of your mouth. Not always, but usually. And then there's usually like an eye width here. If you look at that eye width, that usually fits in here. Okay. Eyebrows. Eyebrows sit on the top of the frontal bone. Well, the place where the frontal bone ends and the interior of the eye socket sort of begins, which is part of the sphenoid and lateral, and on the side, the zygomatic. Sorry, that was my little I can't think. So then the tops of the ears basically usually line up at the top of the eyebrows. The bottom of the ears usually line up at the bottom of the nose. Again, not always, but a lot of times. I never will forget, I taught these two students, they were twins and they were from Brazil. They always wore beanies or wore their hair over their ears. And when we did self-portraits, I thought it was really interesting how they both made their ears too small. And so I was showing them all the general rules and things, and they were like, but Professor Vaughn, like we come from an area where people have people tend to have smaller ears. And then they took, the male identifying student took their beanie off, and then the female identifying sister put her hair behind her ears, and they had drawn their ears accurately. So again, generalized rules, these are not for everybody, okay? So then we come down here, we can see on the outside here, the sternomastoid on each side to the clavicle notch or the sternum notch. Then I don't know, hair, what kind of hair did they want? I don't know, that's, perhaps they have side bangs. Like a side pony. Okay, erase that all away. You might need to switch to your softer charcoal now. Depends on how full that is. Okay, so let's switch to our softer charcoal. I might have been using my soft, I think it was. Okay. let's just try to put it on a different place so you don't end up in the same location. So egg, median, transverse, about a third, about a third, about a third, halfway, halfway, halfway there, gets the ear, halfway here, gets the ear, come down from the jaw into the neck. And if you draw your egg too big, that's okay. Just shrink it, dink it down. I don't know if you all know what shrink dinks are. There used to be these things, you put them in the oven and they'd shrink. I don't know if they still make them. Good, thank you. Oh, they're still around. They're probably made from some obscenely horrible toxic chemical. You know, because they're a toy from the 60s or 70s. So then halfway through that space there, halfway through that space there, the eye is looking ahead. We can put in the eyes, we can put in the nose, we can put in the bottom of the lip, a little bit higher for the mouth. The corners of the mouth generally line up with the pupils, not always, but generally, and then down there. And so right now, like, don't worry about like nailing the this idea of like a gestural face. This is the first time many of you have ever done this. So like, make mistakes, make a mess, make bad drawings. No pressure. If you do make a bad drawing, guess what? You just wipe it away. Now, the classroom, what I often do is I'll set everybody up in a circle and we will go around in a circle and you will follow somebody. And after every drawing, you will erase their drawing to help, again, disassociate from the idea that a drawing has to be something which is perfect and something which must be saved at all times. So then let's look at the head from the side. There's our two eggs. Now the neck comes out from the mastoid process, which is behind the ear. And then here we're going to come down like that. Median line, outie, innie, outie. So that becomes the space between the clavicles. The first rib goes underneath the clavicle, and then that becomes the rib cage, like such. Look at that sort of shape. Out, in, out. Okay, and then watch, it's like parentheses. Even Leonardo spoke about the parentheses. Out, in, out. So we have out parentheses, you know, in parentheses. Left, right parentheses, whatever you want to call them. Okay, so here, if we divide this space again in half, that's going to tell us where the eye is. And now here, we're looking at halfway through the frontal bones. So think about your box in space. It turns at the zygomatic. Okay, and so then that means that halfway through the space from the median line to this edge is where the other eye goes. A third, a third, a third. And that's all you need to do for now. Get feeling that distance. Let's do it from the other side. Side egg, frontal egg, connect, boop, boop, boop. Median line. Think about your box, like there's the box, boop, 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 boop. Okay, then so then eyes come halfway through, halfway from here to here, boop. Halfway from here to here, boop. A third, a third, a third. Ear lines up with the eyebrow, boop, 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 boop. Lines up at the bottom, boop, 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 boop. Mastoid to the sternum. There's the jaw. It's going to be inside the jaw. Most people, the neckline is going to be inside the jaw. down, down, sternum. Erase. Okay, I'm gonna pause the recording. Well, what we're gonna do, and just a reminder where I'm now recording, go ahead and create your space. Okay, and then just go ahead and very gently, just go ahead and tone it. We're gonna want that tone because it's gonna work into that tone a little bit today. Okay, so to start with, let's kind of start off with our general proportions. So we're going to start with a nice, we're going to do a head facing us. So go ahead and give yourself an egg. Divide that median line. Transverse line for the eyes halfway up. Come down the curve or where you feel that first sort of like trajectory to the side. Pull in the neck. Pull in the neck. Okay. All right, so here we go. Okay. Eyes are halfway up. You can pull that the median line straight to the neck if you want. Eyes are halfway up. Okay, then we're going to go down here. We're going to divide that space into thirds. Third, third. Find the center over here. Let's go ahead and put in the shadow for the eye, like so. As we spoke about here, and here is about the temples, halfway of a width of an eye. So we know that the ear is going to kind of go in through here. And again, generalized rules, they're not real. I mean, they're generalized, right? But in this case, we're not doing anything real. We're just making up a face. That tells us that the eyebrows are going to come around equal. Boop, 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 boop. You know, lots of people have lots of different eyebrows, right? Then we can just say, all right, well, the hair is really important because hair is value, hair is color, hair is texture. Hair just, you know, it's a big part of this, right? And so, of course, you could have no hair. That would be perfectly fine and just as perfect and beautiful and, you know, empowering as if you did have hair. I don't know, whatever, okay? But we're going to give our person hair because most of you have hair and you're going to want to, you know, think about drawing your hair. Let's give it a value, okay? I don't know, just leave it like loosey-goosey like that, whatever that is. It's like a, you know, like a little pixie, but you know, if we elongate it back here, now it's not a pixie, right? It's a world of possibility. But we're just going to give ourselves a value there because that value is going to help us create our space. Okay, now we know that the center of the nose is built and we have a bridge of the nose, right? And we know that this width of the eye comes up to basically the tear duct. So we know that like here, our eye is going to be in here. Okay, and we know that this is basically going to be the width of our nose. Now that can increase or decrease as we go through. Again, we're starting with a general shape here. That doesn't mean that that's what we're going to end up with. Yeah, right now I'd say things look just a little bit off proportionally in my drawing, but that's also flatness. Okay, we're gonna fix that. So we have our bridge of our nose, then we know that our nostrils are gonna come through here. Boo, 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 boo. And again, I'm just drawing the shadows. Shadow underneath the bottom lip, and then the shadow between the lips. And then the shadow under the chin. Let's talk about drawing the nose first. Nobody knows.
Professor, is
Hi.
there a way to is there a way to determine like how far from the eyes the eyebrows are?
Yeah, I would say it's about, just to start with, you could say like if your pupil is going to be about this big, I would, like you can see mine's about an equal 1 to 1. Oh, sorry, you can't
Okay.
see because I moved the paper.
Yeah, we can no.
Sorry, there we go.
That's okay.
Okay, so like if we say like, okay, like here, right? Like that's the height of the eye. How do I know? Right now, it's just gonna go by what feels good. I'm just gonna say, well, I'm gonna go up like a height of an eye there, okay? Now, it could be an arch, it could be a thick eyebrow. So don't take too much stock in it right now, okay?
Okay.
Right now, I'm just basically saying this is the height. There's another height to the eyebrow,
Okay.
okay? All right. So, drawing the nose. Okay, let's look at drawing the nose here. So we established that shadow under the nose, right? And then we said, well, there's a bridge to the nose. Okay, so basically now we have like sort of Abraham Lincoln's hat. Okay. Do you know that the first time somebody walked out of the person that invented the top hat, the first time they walked out of their store, people screamed? I just think that's interesting. I think people scream these days if you see somebody with a top hat, but there was a period of time when nobody screamed when they saw a top hat, right? Okay, so you're gonna have like kind of an egg on the bottom there. It's like the back of the egg facing you. And then you have like another wee little egg right here. Another wee little egg there. And so then here, we're going to harden this a little bit temporarily with angles. And then here, what I want to do is sort of like a third of the way up. Follow the idea of the perspective. Don't think about it as a nose, just think about it as like make it into another shape in your brain. The bottom of the plane is important because that's the space in which the nostril exists, right? We need a nostril to breathe. Y'all, nostrils are not dark holes that no light penetrates, okay? There's light that goes up in the nostril. It's not a hole, it's a transition. I always say, and I probably said this before, I can't remember. I always tell students just, we've all had to pick our nose at one point. So we know things can go up in there, right? It's not just a dark circle. It cannot be, there's no transition to it. So that means that if it's transitional, that means that light comes in and comes out. So then depending, y'all, on like you know, the perspective of the head, that's going to dictate how much of this bottom plane is visible. But right now we're just focusing kind of like straight on. Now here, if we're straight on, usually we have our bridge of our nose. Okay. Now, one of the things you don't want to do is this, like people will do this. And they kind of like leave that. And what are they indicating? They're indicating the planar shift from the side of the nose to the bridge. But it's not hard edge, y'all. It's not a hard edge. Okay. So what you want to do is we're going to actually put it in as a value on each side, like so. But then go ahead and blend it out. We still want to retain it, okay? We don't want to lose it. We don't want to blend it away completely. There is usually some type of shadow there because the bridge of the nose does step out into space. But it's not a contour, you see. Excuse me. Now, bring down that shadow through here. And now light is only hitting the top part of the nose. Right? Now there's usually some type of shadow here and here around that sort of what I call the bulbous part of the nose. If you want to see the best noses in painting, Western painting, I'm just going to go with Rembrandt. Go look at Rembrandt's noses. Sorry, everybody, just a moment.
I think that's part of it. I just noticed that it went off.
Oh, okay. That was such a good mouth and nose lesson. Okay. So if you're just joining us, then you did not see the mouth and nose lesson and you are out of luck. Just, you know, figure it out yourself. No, I'll have to redo that at some point. All right. So apparently I have a phone call. So here we go. Thanks for reminding me to turn that on. So if we pull the light from above, then we know now that like this is going to, like our eyebrows are going to push a shadow down into the eyes, okay? And that's going to be helpful because it's going to help us to see, in this case, this person has a creased eyelid, and that's going to be helpful for us to see that creased eyelid, okay? We're going to see that sort of protrusion of the eyelid, and we're going to see it, y'all, literally because light is coming from above. And so the eyelid, which is the levator palpebrae superioris, is going to be light. Now inside here, imagine that there's like a little U shape. This is where when you're tired, you get that bag under your eyes, you know what I mean? That's the bottom of the muscle, which is the orbicular oculi. So go ahead and make that darker. And we can lighten it later. Right now, we're just identifying spaces. So then that means that the top of the zygomatic here will be lighter. Like so. Do you see? Now you can probably also see a little bit of that skull in there, right? Like, and that's good. That tells us that we're getting the dimensionality of the head because the skull is underneath all the muscles and the skin and all that kind of good stuff. Now let's come down. Let's go ahead and do like what we did in the little demo. Let's identify the bottom plane of the nose. And then we've got our 3 circles, a larger circle, then our 2 smaller circles, and then inside here we have our nostril. They're not holes, remember, they're more like little like spaces of light and dark. Now go ahead and lift out the light down the bridge of the nose because we know that's going to be pretty bright. And we can kind of like transition some of the shadow down the side of the nose because of just like the way that the light is moving through the space. So then here underneath the nose, let's go ahead and get the Cupid's bow in. First, let's get that in darker. Or my person's got a really wide bridge and a very small end of their nose. It's a bit better. Okay, and then light is coming, we've sort of said light's coming pretty strongly through here. So that mouth is going to line up, the corners of the mouth are going to line up with the pupils, boop, boop. And then that light's pretty strong. So let's go ahead and give like a darker top lip. It's basically like 2 mountains in the sunset. Let's give them a stronger, lighter bottom lip. Because again, that light's coming from the top. But then a pretty pronounced shadow under the bottom lip. Now rhythm, right? Light, dark, dark, light between the Cupid's bow and the top lip, dark, light, dark. Light. And then underneath the jawline, of course, dark. Now we can see here, but I've got 2 sort of different shaped jaws. So it's like even that out. Okay. Now, different things happen to people at different ages. Okay, and depending on the age of a person, you know, that might make their like, for instance, like their nose project further out. It might, you know, as you age, like your nose never stops growing, so your nose might be a larger nose, longer ears, because as you grow, your ears never stop growing. Okay, so depending on the person, each person's physical features might differ, and especially as someone ages and grows. So on the ear, that's pretty hard for a lot of people. Let's break it into planes. The plane of the top of the ear. Okay, that's an important plane because that's going to tell you that the ear has dimensionality and it's curved in through there. Okay, now you have the little piece that comes out here, and then behind it is going to be dark. Same thing on this side. You have that top plane. You have that little thing there, the little cartilage, and then dark on the inside. Make sure the hairline goes behind the ear usually. Now, we said underneath was darker, so let's follow that down. So, okay, so we're going to go back into the eyes. So, sorry, you're going to see me because I had to get close. Define the iris and the pupil. The iris is the color part, the pupil is the black. Never show the whole eye unless your person's really frightened. Now, it's okay to give us a little bit of a line here that indicates that there's a shadow though. It's not a line. Okay. Don't you dare give me a cartoon eye. We didn't draw eggs for nothing. Now underneath the eye, there's probably going to be a little bit of a highlight on that bottom waterline. It's not gigantic, it's the thickness of the eggshell, but it's in there. Same thing over here. Like so. Okay. So moving right along here. Okay. Okay. And so when we look at like the eye, one of the things that we want to think about is like how much of the eyelid is visible, if the eyelid is visible, you know, and everybody has different sort of eye shapes, okay? So when we look at this individual, okay, we're going to go ahead and give them more of a monolid eye. So like an eye that doesn't have a deep crease, which is more typical on somebody with like an Asian, okay, eye, rather than like European, which is more of a hooded eye. So to do that, when you come through here, instead of leaving just that sort of hard eyelid line and then maybe putting a light on the other side there to create a crease, instead, erase that space out and make it more smooth and round. And the same thing on the other eye. Let that be more smooth, and that will give you more of a monolid eye shape. Lost my charcoal. There it is. And then that shape is sort of echoed with a little bit more of an elongated eye. Strengthen the shadows around the nostril, inside the nostril. Strengthen a little bit more underneath the bottom lip. Strengthen that line, that shadow line between the lips. A little bit darker there, but again, because we're drawing someone with more of a monolid, this is going to be a smoother transition inside here. Not always, whatever. Definitely happens. Okay. Strengthen the light on the top of the ear. And then we can start to think about hair. Now, let's go ahead and start the process of applying, like, so this is our individual, they have sort of shorter hair here. Let's give them longer hair, okay? Now, I want to do this on purpose because it's something which comes up a lot, which is like the longer hair around the neck. So that's why we're going to do it, because I actually quite like the short hair on this individual that we've created. But let's go ahead and push it so that they have longer hair so we can talk about the way the hair sits on the neck. Okay, so go ahead and let's begin. Let's sort of strengthen this sort of, we better make a middle part because most of you are millennials and I know that, you know, side parts are not really cool anymore. So we're gonna go with that middle part there. I guess you're Gen Z. Oh my gosh. Most of you at least. Okay, so there's our middle part there. Okay, so go ahead and let's strengthen the shadow where the hair is touching the forehead, because we said our light's coming from the top. So then let's go ahead and strengthen the light on the top of the head. Okay, and then just pull it through. Like so. Okay. Now the hair, as it goes behind the ear, there's some tension. So go ahead and strengthen some sort of cranial tension. Just like drawing the water, get the dark underneath the light to show the movement. Don't draw every strand of hair, y'all. It will turn flat really quickly. Same thing over here. Every bit of the hair is an egg. It's all eggs. Tension behind the ear. Now I'm just trying to draw things which might come up. So I don't know, maybe their hair doesn't have to go behind their ears. I don't know, you figure it out. I'm just drawing things that will probably come up in our discussions, okay? Now, the hair is going to come down through here and down through here. All right, so now things get hard. How does hair cover How does hair cover a neck? First things first, draw the neck first. Don't draw the contours of the hair first. Draw the neck first. If you're wearing glasses, draw the face first. Put the glasses on the face. If your person's wearing a hat, draw the head first. Put the hat on the head. Understand how what is underneath will affect what is on top. So now we have their hair and it's going to come out and drop down. Here, same thing, it's going to come out. Say it comes out more this way. Okay. Go ahead and put it in as a darker value. Sure. Darker value, sure, of course. Why, of course? I don't know. I just feel like saying of course. Okay. That looks pretty good just like that. But is it speaking hair? I don't know. I don't know. So find the lights. Where are the lights? Over there. Okay, that makes sense. Light's coming from above. It's going to go around the head, create a dark, then that will be light. Okay. Well, if there's light, then there's dark. Everything's an egg. Now, here, don't make a contour line there. If you do, you're going to read it as the neck, and it's not the neck, it's the hair. Soften that line. Break it up. Make it organic. Same thing on the other side. Dark plane is in here. Break it up. Light planes over there. Now, shoulder and shoulder. Now, this is bright, so go ahead and darken behind the head. But don't darken all the way down. Let it come into that lighter value. But darken behind the head to step the head forward. Oh, look, what is that? Just like, it's just like the egg. Okay. Don't draw eyelashes. Now, if you see that someone has really thick eyelashes, maybe there's a little bit of darkness, then think about adding that as a weighted shadow area. But if you draw eyelashes on, you have to remember that every eyelash has a highlight, a midtone, and a shadow. Okay. All right. Take a picture, upload it.